despite your going to the best doctors, you're still not getting the right diagnostics and the right information about what's really going on under the hood for you. And you recently did some blood tests with Function Health.
Yes,
and
I
we found
did.
a lot of interesting things.
I did some blood tests with Function Health.
Nothing catastrophic, but it's the little things that we can find early and that can help us on the sort of transition from wellness to illness and kind of turn back that tide. And we're going to get into it in a minute, but it also strikes me that your work around your father, Sergeant Shriver, who started the Peace Corps, for those who don't know, because maybe there's people in their 20s who never heard of President Kennedy or anything. I don't know. It's amazing. You'll believe it. I actually had a friend who, when I turned 64, she put on a Beatles song for me on the YouTube. And it was, when I turned 64. Yeah. And she's like, look, there's the Beatles. And it was like a cover band. And she didn't actually know who the Beatles were. So,
wow, really?
Really. So I'm just saying, Sergeant Shriver was the father of the Peace Corps. And
the War on Poverty, and Head Start, and Job Corps, and what we now know as AmeriCorps, and foster grandparents.
So much,
legal services for the poor, all of these. And I say that because these programs came out of his brain. They came out of his creativity. They came out of him being somebody who worked in government, but who was also incredibly creative in that role, which isn't usually what you hear in government. He was restless, he was creative, he was driven, he was relentless, and he was an incredible intellectual. Went to Yale, was the editor of the Yale Daily News, went to Yale Law School. So he was served in the war on a submarine. His mind was extraordinary. So watching a mind like that could create all of these things, that could come up with ways of getting them passed and turned into real programs that helped and still help millions of people, to watch that go to I don't know what a fork is. I thought to myself, now I have to try to understand this. First, I wanted to try to understand it. What is that? What happens in the brain? When does that happen to the brain? Was there something that we could have done? Was there something we missed? And so that began a journey for me, first as a reporter, then as an author, then as a documentarian, then as a film producer.
Advocate, and now you're working with Cleveland Clinic.
And then really, as I went through it, I was noticing, actually what led me to women was I was noticing that more and more women seemed to have Alzheimer's. And when I went to all the researchers, they would say to me, no, that's just because women live longer. That's the only reason. And I was like, no, I don't think that's true. And so I partnered with the Alzheimer's Association, and we did a report that took 2 years. I was First Lady of California at the time. It's called the Shriver Report. And we changed the narrative single-handedly around Alzheimer's to put women at the front and center of that disease, because it turned out that women were 2/3 of those who got Alzheimer's. And so now when you talk about Alzheimer's, people talk about women being disproportionately impacted. I started the Women's Alzheimer's Movement to fund research into what is that? What's happening in women's brains in their 50s or their late 40s that might make them more susceptible in their 70s.
No, this is such an important point. And we're going to get back to your own lab test, because it sort of speaks to how do we focus on prevention or finding the things that are out of balance that actually can lead to disease. And I think your dad, I had the chance to meet him, and your mom in church, actually. And
that's the best place to meet, though. That's where they were every day.
I mean, I'm a Jew, went to church. It was okay. I went to Sunday Mass.
That's good, because you have to be educated about all religions.
Absolutely.
It takes all of us.
But I knew who he was, and to see him in that state of kind of mid-stage Alzheimer's was really heartbreaking. And I think for me, a lot of my work has been around how do we prevent these things? And now your work is like, well, why does this happen? How can we detect it early? What are the things we know about the disease that can make a difference and prevent this trajectory from, a brilliant mind to basically an absent mind.
Right.
And so your work a lot has been trying to sort of navigate the understanding of the root causes, and how do we look at these things, and how do we do more research about it, and how do we detect things early. And the good news is there's a lot of things that we can do. And we know, for example, in Alzheimer's, that diet plays a huge role. The exercise plays a role. The nutritional status plays a role. B12 and vitamin D and methylation. We know the toxins play a role, that the gut microbiome plays a role, that insulin resistance and blood sugar play a role. So these are all modifiable risk factors. People don't think of preventing Alzheimer's. They think of preventing heart disease.
Well, I think what's interesting about that is that when I've been in the kind of Alzheimer's advocacy space for 20 years, because my dad was diagnosed in 2003. And lifestyle was not a part of the conversation when he was originally diagnosed. And then as I started researching it as a reporter and started then looking at women and trying to understand what was happening in women, I said, is there anything is it lifestyle connected? Yeah. Is there anything we're doing, how we live? Yeah. Is it menopause? Yeah. Any of these things? And everybody's like, no, lifestyle has nothing to do with any of this.
Yeah.
Jump to today. In the last 5 years, there's been a sea change around how we talk about Alzheimer's, about saying now you have people saying, well, maybe half of these cases could be preventable due to lifestyle choices made early on, right? What you're talking about. That was when I started, it was only plaques and tangles, right? That's tau, plaques and tangles.
Amyloid, yeah. It's just basically the stuff that happens in the brain.
Right. But no one spoke about the importance of exercise. Nobody spoke about diet. Nobody spoke about nutrition in the brain. So I think this is a sea change in the Alzheimer's space. Nobody even talked about prevention of Alzheimer's. We opened the first women's Alzheimer's prevention center at the Cleveland Clinic. Right. And everybody's like, you can't say that. And I was like, why not?
Yeah, you absolutely can.
Yeah, but now you can.